It's
Okay.
a, it's
Mhm.
it's a it's a really wealthy area. I mean, I guess I should say it generates a lot of wealth, and very little of it stays in the communities there.
Mm. Yeah,
It's
the Imperial Valley.
yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I wanted to get started, everyone. So welcome to this panel on putting environmental justice into practice. I hope you're as excited as I am to be learning from these speakers. And just to open up the panel, I actually wanted to make space for the division and the Department of Population and Public Health Sciences to give an introduction. So take it away.
Well,
Thank you very much, Justine. I'm Howard Hu. I'm the chair of the Department of Population and Public Health Sciences here at the Keck School of Medicine of USC. I just want to welcome our panelists and everybody who's attending this topic. We happen to be the department that's very proud of having a division of environmental health that's directed by Professor Rob McConnell, who'll be on in just a minute. That is one of the great superpowers of environmental health research in the country and the world. And an amazing attribute of their work is that it's also translated into policy. They work very hard in engaging environmental justice challenged communities all throughout Southern California to ensure that their work gets translated into policy that protects people's health. Of course, we're also very proud of the fact that the president of the university is a member of our faculty in this division. She's an environmental health scientist herself, and both Rob and I serve on her presidential working group on sustainability, which is all part of why we're so enthusiastic and grateful to Justine Po, a medical student in the Keck School of Medicine, for organizing and pushing us all to put this event on and inviting our amazing guest speaker, Robin Greenfield, and other guests to this event. So let me hand this off now to Rob. Rob?
good. So I'll be brief. Um, Howard told you a little bit about the department. I direct the Southern California Environmental Health Sciences Center, which is an NIH supported infrastructure center here at USC, and the Center for Children's Environmental Health, also supported by US or by NIH. And we're really excited to have this talk today about this discussion about putting environmental justice into practice, connecting grassroots activism, research, and community investment. And we've got a great panel moderated by Christine. I'm going to not take any more of your time, Christine or Justine. I'm sorry, and go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you, Robin Howard. I really appreciate it. So just to orient everyone, there's going to be three parts to this panel. First, we're going to be discussing pressing issues in environmental justice, then the role of community partnerships, and then finally, how audience members can help create change. And we're in webinar mode, so we'll ask audience members to please hold questions until the end and submit their questions in the chat, and then we'll be going through and picking questions. And as well, we'll have a chance to kind of highlight some of the folks who are working on exciting things here at USC regarding environmental justice at the student level. So first, I wanted to introduce our guests. Starting off with Robin, we have Robin Greenfield. He is a truth seeker, activist, and social reformer living in service to the earth. Robin's commitments to environmentalism include his vow to donate 100% of his media earnings to grassroots movements, to downsize his belongings to only 44 possessions in 2020, and develop numerous community programs, including Seeds for the People and community fruit trees. This Earth Month, Robin is filming a documentary to explore the industrial food system behind school lunches in the United States, while highlighting local solutions now in Richmond for schools that are growing and sourcing their own food. And yeah, so that's Robin. And then we also have Elizabeth Kamai, who is an environmental epidemiologist and research scientist in the Environmental Justice Research Lab at the Keck School of Medicine at USC. Dr. Kamai's work focuses on understanding how exposure to environmental toxins affect the health of pregnant individuals, children, and residents of environmental justice communities. Her projects include evaluating neighborhood health impacts of industries that emit toxic chemicals, characterizing sources and levels of air pollution, analyzing how living near urban oil and gas production affects pregnancy health, and finally, assessing effects of particulate matter on children's health in rural California. And last but not least, we have Connie Valencia, who is a Sustainability Solutions Community Engagement Fellow in the Environmental Justice Research Lab at USC. She's also a first-generation college Latina, born and raised here in Boyle Heights. And Connie's research is focused on understanding the role that neighborhood resources have in engaging residents in discussions on environmental health disparities through qualitative research methods. She also assesses the protective role of neighborhood institutions on air pollution exposure among Hispanic, Latino ethnic enclaves through quantitative research methods. And Connie is currently collaborating on the Imperial Valley Respiratory Health and the Environment Study. So with all of that, I hope you all are excited. We're going to get started with some of our questions. So first of all, for all of you speakers, you've all dedicated significant time trying to address environmental issues in the community. So from a community perspective, what do you see as the most pressing issues impacting environment and health? And feel free, whoever feels like they want to speak, go for it.
I'll go second.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, thank you very much for that question. That's a really complex question. Communities are faced with a variety of problems. And I think it really comes down to, what other problems that our residents are facing. For instance, because of issues of work, issues of immigration status, community violence, and other issues, many times it's hard for residents to be able to engage or enjoy their environment. Also because, many times these residents are faced with decisions of whether should they go out or not, especially when dealing with air pollution, air quality, poor air quality related to the variety of sources of a variety of pollution sources that may be within their neighborhoods. And outdoor air pollution is a public health concern because of the link to the variety of the onset of chronic illnesses such as asthma, upper respiratory health disease, and other chronic illnesses. And yeah, this is just a really complex issue, and I want to leave some room for the other speakers to jump in and chime in.
Yeah, I definitely feel very in alignment with that. I think that the two things that I would like to share are often in the mainstream environmental movement, what gets the most attention is what's visual, what people can see. But air quality is a perfect example of one of the most pressing, important issues to our communities that the average person doesn't pay too much attention to because one, you can't see it generally, and two, it is through environmental injustice placed in the lower income communities, especially lower income communities of color, which is not where the media is covering. And so for the average person, I think that's the thing that I would like to add is one, that just because it's what you see in the media doesn't mean it is the most pressing issue. And then secondly, that is often a question that I receive, which is what's the most important? But the thing is that every issue is connected. When we live in this society that's based on all of our systems being monetized and being largely owned by a relatively small amount of corporate power, then all of these issues are connected. And so I like to focus on the key things that all of us deal with on a daily basis: food, water, energy, waste, transportation, air being another one. And so my suggestion to people out there who are looking to get into the environmental movement is to focus on what it is that will benefit your community the most, and doing the diligence to find out the truth behind that by getting your message from the community who's experiencing the environmental issues.
And I'll just echo a lot of what Connie and Robin just said. I think many environmental justice issues are hyper-local to that community. Some communities have legacy contamination from industrial polluters or bad actors that are really specific sources in their community. There are others that are bordered by freeways. There are others with agricultural exposures. And one thing that is in common across many environmental justice communities is sort of this cumulative burden. They're not just dealing with that one freeway or that one industry. It's often many different kinds of environmental concerns, whether it's air pollution or water or soil or just safety and discomfort or concerns about being able to experience their outdoor environment. And I think a lot of these issues are really exacerbated and are really going to play out differently in different communities with climate change. And just to highlight that, you know, climate change, we're experiencing increasing heat waves and more extreme heat waves in LA. And the experience of living in a heat wave is very different for folks who are wealthy and living in shaded communities than for those who are in communities with no shade and no central AC and have to choose between paying for the electricity to power their AC versus paying their car payment to get to work. So I think there's these issues of sort of hyper-local environmental justice, cumulative burden, and then inequitable effects of climate change, which is happening to everyone, but it's affecting communities in different ways, depending on different vulnerabilities.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thanks to all the speakers. I think you all speak to the social determinants of health that are related to the environment in this, and I think Connie started us off really strong in terms of the considerations that are needed. For example, if, you know, here at the medical school, we think a lot about exercise and diet and lifestyle modification as part of, you know, patients' regimens for what's going to help them with whatever, you know, health challenges they're facing. But the reality is that in some communities, it can be difficult for many reasons to, let's say, go out to the park and exercise for a bit, or go for a run, or, you know, take your children out to play. There's many considerations. And just given the intertwining of things, let's say with food insecurity, we started talking about air pollution, water and soil quality, and you know, I know that you all do a lot of research with toxic exposures as well. These are all inevitably linked to one another. So can you share any emerging solutions that you see to address these issues jointly?
I can start with a challenge, actually, in that our regulatory and policy systems are largely set up to address one by one chemical at a time, one exposure source at a time, one sort of media at a time, air or water or soil. So overcoming that challenge is a really key part of addressing these cumulative concerns, being able to create policies and enact legislation that does take into account cumulative burden of communities, that they are experiencing many different things, and it's not just a matter of reducing a single exposure or addressing a single toxin or source of pollution. So I think really systemic changes around the way that chemicals and the environment and these unhealthy exposures and pollutants are regulated and controlled is one avenue to begin to address these concerns.
Go ahead, Robin.
Okay. So yeah, I would like to share two small notes before I answer the question. First is just, I want to acknowledge that I'm really excited. I'm excited for the the combination we have here between Elizabeth, Connie, and I, because you know, a lot of people don't necessarily understand my work fully because they see the sort of extreme activism I do and they get a bit hyper focused on it. Like, for example, living like the average American, US American for a month and wearing all of the garbage that I create to create a visual so people understand just how much trash one person creates. The thing is that the whole purpose of my activism is to get critical thought started and self-reflection and get people to dive into the people who have dedicated their lives. And Elizabeth and Connie are two of these people where that's my goal. My goal is to do things in a way that are interesting, that are going to get millions of people to see them, but then to funnel them into understanding things deeper. And environmental justice, environmental injustice, this to me is one of the most important things for the US American public to understand, that we're only, if you look at it, like so few people even know the word environmental justice. In fact, as an environmental activist, I only really started to hear it consistently a couple years ago, and I've been dedicated to environmental activism for about 12 years. So I'm really glad that this is the conversation that we're having, and that I get to play a role in interacting with the people that my job is to get more people to listen to. One little note to that is I also want to say that I feel very qualified to be able to speak upon this, but not all of it by any means. I'm new to environmental justice just to quite some degree. And also as someone who's relatively privileged and a white man who's never lived in a community that really deals with the burden of environmental injustices, I only know so much. And I just really want to be able to share that. And then, so as far as answering the question, I'll keep that as a really simple thing that I'm excited about, and that's community compost initiatives. Here in Los Angeles, there's LA Compost. In Brooklyn, there's, for example, BK Rot. And so these community compost initiatives that are designed, powered by the community, that are focused on environmental injustices are a really beautiful way to see people coming together, doing something they can easily solve together as a community, easily improve the community through healthy soils that they're creating, decreasing fossil fuel usage through large scale trucks, because a lot of them are doing this by bicycle power. So it's been beautiful to get to see some of these organizations, see them growing over the last years, and see them as a very strong part of the solution.
And then Connie, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, at the local level, I think it's important to work with community organizations. Part of my dissertation work was working on understanding civic engagement from a community organization perspective, and I got to work with Legacy LA, which is a local nonprofit organization here in Boyle Heights that's focused their efforts on addressing environmental injustices. And through residents, engaging residents in discussions about air quality, they were able to create the Natural Park Air Pollution Solution Project, which is a conceptual park that hasn't been built yet, but their goal is to raise funds to create a green space along that will help mitigate the air pollution that comes from the local 15-lane freeway. The Ramona Gardens housing complex is which is where the park they hope to build a park, is to also mitigate the emissions from the industrial corridor, the train tracks, and the daily vehicles, the daily emissions that are emitted from over 200,000 cars that pass through that particular freeway, plus the surface streets. So talking to, their focus is to educate, empower local residents by educating them on the different types of pollutants and counting vehicles, trucks, understanding, really getting a different perspective, getting residents' perspectives at, what they're living, they're understanding their lived experiences in these overburdened communities. So I think that really understanding and working with them is definitely a solution. And when I say working with them, I also mean that it's important. One of the things that they would like is for more elected officials and decision makers to work with them jointly to so they can see what they're experiencing and develop comprehensive solutions.
Thank you, Connie. And then just to add a little bit of color to that, to my understanding, with Ramona Gardens, one aspect that's really interesting is that they have so much youth involvement. I think they've had a lot of youth leadership, and young people going out into their own community, and even I believe like surveying people in the community to get their opinions on the park. And I had the opportunity to hear some of them speak on a previous occasion, and they're so passionate about getting the funding for this, and I believe they've raised a fair amount. So I'm very confident and excited to see how that plays out in the future. Okay, thank you all. So going on to the next question, one thing that we started to talk a little bit about was climate change. And I really feel that addressing environmental issues and especially climate change in this day and age has really become a political issue in a way that it wasn't in the past. Just looking back historically at the passage of the Clean Air Act by President Nixon, he was a Republican, and this was an issue where we had bipartisan support at one point. So I was curious from all of you, and maybe Connie, if you want to start, what solutions do you see to bridge this divide in this work?
Yeah, there are definitely well, because of the Clean Air Act, there have definitely certain policies have been put into place, like the cap and trade and emission standards have helped reduce the level of pollution, of air pollution, and has helped air quality to some degree. However, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. And once again, this has to do with working with local communities, especially overburning communities. And this is going to require the collaboration between communities, but also state and local agencies, because many times there's a lack of collaboration between these agencies that do not support residents. They will rather support big polluters like Exide, like what we saw earlier. For many years, Exide was working with illegal permits, and for over 30 years. And even though there were reports that they were not properly that their emission standards were really high, unfortunately, and residents were actually alerting these agencies and other state officials about their concerns, and they wanted Exit to be closed down, and it took a long time for them to be able to say, okay, enough is enough. But it really requires elected officials and agencies to really come down and talk to residents, understand, what is it that they're experiencing, what kind of health concerns do they have, what kind of challenges are they facing, are they able to breathe properly, what kind of allergies are they experiencing just by coming out. Unfortunately, working with Legacy LA, one of the things that I learned is that many of the kids in Ramona Gardens are sleeping with CPAP machines. Part of the reason why I wanted to understand this a little bit more is because as a child, I had several, I went to the local, county here, General Hospital, several times for asthma, what the doctor said, induced asthma. And many times it wasn't I was never informed that it was because of where I lived. It was, I was told to look for plants that may have certain like feather-like characteristics, and to stay away from them, but I never saw those plants. And so then as a graduate student, I realized, wait, maybe it's the fact that I live so close to the freeway. Maybe it's because my house is close to Exide, or other industrial facilities that may be the reason why I experience so many asthma attacks. Thank you.
Elizabeth or Robin?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that experience that you had as a childhood and your realization of it in your university time. It's amazing that our society is designed in a way where what's so obvious is so hidden from us. It's so obvious that these industries in the communities, when you have massive industry right there in community, that the people who live next to those industries are going to suffer. But amazingly, that's not common knowledge today, because the industry has done a very, very successful job of keeping us from knowing that. And so, again, it's one of the reasons why it's so important to have these conversations, which the challenging thing today is, the question that you asked, Justine, is how to reach people, because it often, so much of this is politicized. And when it's politicized, you have different groups of people where when one receives this message, they receive it as a message from the person that they're supposed to defend themselves from or win, in an argument or an election. And so there's a lot of polarization, and there's a lot of not listening to each other, not hearing each other. And so my suggestion to the people in this realm, which I would imagine just about everybody listening are people that are trying to advance this nation and this world in us living in a way in which is of more harmony, where our basic human needs are met, where our basic needs for health are met. So we have a lot of responsibility in the conversations being polarized in the way in which we bring ourselves to the conversations. And so I think one thing that we can do is always try to remember the point of view of the people who are on the other side, even though they might be the ones who are creating the pollution or enforcing that pollution that is taking away a very basic human right. I try to always remember that these are also human beings who are also trying to meet their basic human needs of belonging, of love, of making money in order to feed their families and bring them to school and such. And although there may be definitely misguidance that the way they're doing it is harming others and is not equitable or not just, remembering that they're humans. And when you come to a conversation and see someone as a human, they are much more likely to want to hear what you have to say, to open up rather than to close down. So all that to say is just remember that we're all human beings. We're all operating in this difficult world. And even the people who are doing more of the polluting are struggling. I like to remember everybody is suffering under this system. And when we remember that everybody is suffering and we come with compassion, I think we're more likely to move these conversations forward as a community.
Thank you, Robin. Elizabeth?
Yeah, finding common ground is so important, and listening and having these kinds of discussions on a level playing field with all folks from different backgrounds and different communities at the table is really important. And I think one nice example of how this can happen is the idea of just transition, which is a framework for moving away from harmful or polluting or fossil fuel industries, while at the same time ensuring that particularly workers and small businesses in these industries can transition to other jobs, and that the benefits of these safer or greener alternatives to traditional industries or polluting industries really are equitable and break down these existing systems of oppression and marginalization and environmental racism. And I know we work with organizations in South LA that are doing a lot of work around just transition for industries like dry cleaners. Dry cleaners have historically used trichloroethylene and other like very harmful chemicals. But But to just tell these small businesses, stop using this chemical, stop this practice, without engaging in discussions about alternatives or how to transition or harm reduction, how do you make these things happen, is really, it's not as helpful, and it really creates barriers. If you can have this sort of transition framework, if you can bring all of the players, the neighbors and the dry cleaners and community members all to the table, you can have much more open dialogue and productive solutions and creative solutions. So I think we see a lot of sort of building around this kind of just transition framework, similar with as we move away from oil drilling. Los Angeles has the largest urban oil fields in the country. How do we transition the folks that do benefit from jobs in those industries, but are harming their neighbors next door, just in the backyard? This requires like really open dialogue and conversations, and bringing everyone to sort of an even level playing field.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So now I want to transition to the role of community partnerships and talk a little bit about that. So can each of you share an experience you've had with community partnerships that's changed how you approach environmental justice?
I'll go first. So what comes to mind for me is not an exact singular situation, but more of an overall connection to the community over the last years. And for me, I don't live in one community. I've lived in San Diego and Orlando, Florida, St. Pete, Florida, Asheville, North Carolina. I'm currently in Los Angeles for a couple of months, and I'm often in communities for short periods of time. And of course, one of the most important parts about solving things as a community is the people who are in the community need to ideally, if we're going to have real solutions, they're the ones who need to be coming up with the solutions and enacting the solutions. And so much of what we see today is well-meaning outsiders who come in and think that they know what to do, but they don't really know what the community needs or wants. And now this isn't just like an accident. The reality is a lot of this is because a lot of people, they're actually acting from a place of, they want to belong, they want to be loved, they want to be successful, and they cut the corner of finding out what people really want, because what's most important is actually their own success. So for me, it really comes down to checking in with that. And that's what I've been doing more of over the last 5 years, is making sure that whatever I'm doing when I'm working with a community is not to serve my ego, but to really serve the community. And ideally, this would not have to be said, but the reality is, I think that this is the majority of like large nonprofit organizations are more operating on their own desires rather than what the community is actually needing or wanting. Especially, you see this when it comes to like white-led organizations going into communities of color that are the ones that tend to have more of the environmental injustices due to environmental racism. So I think for a lot of people that could be daunting, like, a lot of people who are quite privileged and have never had to listen to anyone. It can be quite daunting, the idea of actually listening and taking a back seat. But I will say, from my personal experience, it's been the most beautiful to be able to take the back seat and to honor listening and like being humble that I actually don't know. It's been exciting. It's been exciting to learn more and to come out of the state of delusion and to come more into a state of really hearing from the people who are experiencing the situation, learning what solutions work for them. And even if I'm like, that's not the solution that I would do. It's got to be coming from them, but then being able to share my experience as well, because we all have valuable experiences to bring into the situation. And as an outsider, there's a possibility that I have knowledge that can be useful as well. So that's what I would add to that.
Any of our other speakers want to chime in?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with as a PhD student. I had the pleasure of being a research justice shop fellow and working with Green MPNA in Santa Ana. And when I started working with them, the first interaction that I had was with Leonel, who is one of the program managers, and he told me, I really want you to focus on the definition of environmental justice. And he said one of the biggest things that usually gets left out is meaningful involvement in the decision-making process. And working with them, I learned so much about SB 1000, AB 617, and understanding that California actually mandates government officials to engage residents in issues related to environmental justice. And it really made me question how many residents, especially from overburdened communities, have gone to a city council meeting to discuss their general plan, to discuss environmental injustices, to discuss and address their concerns. Not many. And many residents are not sure where to go, who to discuss their concerns, talk about odors, talk about the day-to-day things that they experience because they live so close to a train track, to the freeway, to a local incinerator, to a local warehouse. And being able to learn about this, that really helped influence my decision into understanding how does civic engagement, what fuels civic engagement among low-income Latino residents. And but some of the things that I learned is that also being able to work with community partners, it takes to create a sustainable effort, it takes time and trust. Time, it takes is this developing a meaningful and trustworthy relationships requires a lot of time, requires you to be front and center, to be there, listening to residents. Because even though I'm like, even working with Legacy LA, like I'm from Boyle Heights, but they also have their own perspectives. I'm not going to impose my perspectives on the residents or members from Legacy LA because we're all being impacted by environmental injustices differently. And also, it's important to create trust with community organizations to see how can your skills or whatever you have, how can you help them, what kind of skills do you have, or what are their needs, and can you, or myself in this case, I kept asking myself, what can I offer to support not only Legacy lately, but Green MPNA and other organizations that I work with. I always think of myself like, what can I do to support? How can I help create a better, trustworthy relationship? And also think about what's next. What are the next futures? What are the next steps that I can help in to make sure that whatever initiatives they are thinking about, that I can support them in, or who can I connect them with?
Thank you, Connie. And I just wanted to add one thing that you made me think of, which is the utilization of community advisory boards by institutions such as USC. We have, a couple here, and I just think of, for example, at the Norris Comprehensive Cancer Center, there are community members who actually get paid a modest amount to participate in meetings, and I think it's very meaningful that they're compensated and that their expertise is valued and they feel like they are truly a team member. It's not just a one-off thing. We're all working together on this. And then Elizabeth, do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Really just to echo what Connie and Robin have said, that so many of the most meaningful experiences where I've learned the most and have sort of directed my path towards environmental justice and environmental justice research has been just conversations with folks, meeting people who've had different experiences, who have a wealth of expertise that is not necessarily academic, but is so important and so valuable. And this, I mean, I first learned about environmental justice, I think kind of late in life in my graduate training in North Carolina, but I was really strongly influenced and lucky to have the mentorship of the late Steve Wing, who was really involved with the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, and who would really bring in folks and connect his work to really uplift the work of people like Naima Mohammed and others in North Carolina who have been doing environmental justice work for decades. And being able to learn from people like Naima has just been so valuable. And I've really been privileged to be able to continue to learn from organizers and community members throughout Southern California. So just these conversations with people who have just really more knowledge than I ever will about these issues.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And I'm very mindful of trying to cover everything we want to cover today and also make time for people's questions. So in terms of the viewers, please feel free to send any questions that come up during the conversation in the chat, and that way I can kind of look over them later as we go into the Q&A. But kind of before we switch over to thinking about, what are our solutions and how can we really create change as a community, I was curious for you all in terms of any major wins you'd like to share where community partnership has led to significant change, whether that's in policy or practice. And maybe Elizabeth, if you want to start us off.
Sure. So many of the environmental wins, I mean, throughout the country, but particularly here in Southern California, have been driven by residents and communities who have organized around these issues. Connie mentioned Exide. Exide was a battery recycler that was identified by the community as a bad actor, as a polluter, for many years. And it was the organizing of folks like those in East Yards Communities for Environmental Justice who really took on this industry and were able to make a change and to get this facility to stop polluting, but also have been really heavily involved in cleaning up and sustained action from authorities and regulatory agencies. And USC has supported with data and with analyzing soil samples, but these kinds of things, this action and the effectiveness of East Yards has really been their expertise and really community driven, and the organizers in and around Boyle Heights and Exide. I think sort of similarly with oil drilling and fossil fuel extraction in LA, we've had these recent really public sort of policy changes where oil drilling at LA city level and LA county level are being phased out. New oil drilling there's a moratorium, but this is the result of organizing and action from community members like Nayeli Kobo, like Redeemer Community Partnerships that have been working around and living near oil wells for their whole lives and have done a lot of work where we, USC and our EJ Research Lab have helped to provide a little bit of data and to provide evidence that folks living near oil wells have more respiratory health problems and things like that. But it's really these organizers and these communities that drive the change. So I think, again, so much expertise and so much value of these organizations and these individuals. It's really impressive.
Robin or Connie?
Yeah, recently there was a public hearing where against Republic Services, which is it's a plant that processes a lot of like trash, and they've been emitting, they emit a lot of pollution into the air because they burn a lot of trash, and it's a facility that has been in operation for over 30 years. And the Visión City Terrace is a local organization that has been working with residents. And recently they went to a hearing where they talked to the planning commission, and they talked residents demanded for Republic Services to not be given to be denied a permit to continue working. And although they brought lawyers, and some of the lawyers were questioning the types of surveys and methods that Visión City Terrace was doing with local residents, the planning commission actually denied that permit and which means that they are no longer going to be operating until further notice, because some of them were getting trash from different cities and doing more than what they were supposed to. And unfortunately, many of the residents, they were tired of living in the conditions that they were in.
And last but not least, Robin, you have anything to add?
Sure. Well, very exciting to hear about those two wins that you two have been connected to. And what I'd like to share is that there's thousands of those wins happening, all across the United States and all over the world, of people who are standing up for their basic rights, and they're making meaningful change in their community through standing up and taking action. So although a lot of these challenges are incredibly daunting, and some of them are absolutely huge, they're also all cumulative. The more that individual communities come together and make these changes, the more other communities see that it's possible, the more they're able to use those as as sort of game plans or strategies of what they can do in their own community. And so, my job is always to really tell people that there is not that anything's going to be easy, but that this is happening. A lot of people think there's just not that much happening. They see the doom and gloom from the media, but there is so much happening, and there's just thousands of examples. And the only community that makes sense to start with, in my opinion, is the community that you are in right now.
Thank you, Robin. So I think that's a great segue into the final segment of this panel, which is how we can create change. And I think, just to add on, once again, I think it's so beautiful to have people coming from different perspectives and different experiences on this panel who can speak to these issues in, their own unique way. And one thing that, I'm curious about, I'm sure many of our audience members are, is where do you see gaps we can address that kind of they merge the research, the community engagement, and the activism to, address environmental issues? Robin, if you want to start.
Where are the gaps? Well, there's a lot of them. Unfortunately, the way that I look at it is that the system that is currently in place is designed to create a lot of gaps, because the system that's currently in place wants to stay in place. The corporations that are in power want to stay in power. They want to keep their control, and they want to keep their money. And it is part of the strategy of these exploitative systems to divide community and to keep us from knowing the solutions and knowing that it's possible. And so all I can say is that there's so many gaps, and that it's a huge amount of work. Like, this is not easy by any means, and especially for communities that are just struggling to breathe, or struggling to get rest because of airports that are flying right over their community, or freeways that have been carved right in the middle of their community. It's especially hard for people who are dealing with it to be able to come through in all the ways needed to overcome it. So lots of gaps, and lots of hard work and ahead of us.
Go ahead, Elizabeth.
I can take this maybe from sort of an academic or research perspective. I think there's a lot of interest and growing interest in sort of community engaged research or environmental justice research, which is really exciting. I think a lot of people want to be doing good work, but there's frequently gaps between priorities of funding agencies, of academics or researchers, and sort of what is valued for their career paths, and then of the priorities of communities, of these organizations or residents who are working with their local issues in their local systems. So I think sort of bridging these gaps is really challenging and has to happen at a lot of different levels, sort of like the structural level of funding and prioritization, and how sort of advancement in academia and research is set up, but also in how we can allocate time to engagement. As I think both Connie and Robin have said before, that there's community engagement and participating in this kind of research or these kinds of organizations takes so much time and so much trust. And there's this history of extraction and exploitation and really like racism and white supremacy in academia and research and medicine. And so we can't just show up and help out and think we're going to save everything. It requires a lot of reflection, self-reflection, and understanding of why do you want to do community engaged research or community engagement? What are you trying to get out of this? And be really honest before you try to engage with communities, because we can't continue to perpetuate these really extractive and damaging systems. Community organizations and residents are doing so much and facing so many burdens, and to add to those burdens is really harmful. So I think there's a lot of different places where we can start, but I think self-reflection is a really important one, and being really clear about your expectations as a researcher or academic or just a community member.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And to close us out, Connie.
I think from a community-based perspective, a lot of community organizations require a lot of resources to do the work that they do. And I think it's important to understand what are their needs, what kind of financial resources they require, what kind of resources they need to continue sustaining the efforts that they're engaging in, continue supporting the residents that they're working with. You know, many times they're working with low income residents that may have more than one or two jobs. As a result, you know, having stipends to support residents, having stipends to support them with transportation, childcare, stipends to bring in more resources that will help increase educational programs on air pollution. They are really, really essential and important to increase community capacity. But it's not if there's not enough funding to support organizations, these programs can easily be taken away or reduced. And many times organizations are involved in so many campaigns. I mean, like Legacy LA, they're involved in youth leadership, but they're also involved in environmental justice, and they also do rent relief programs. They do women empower. They have them with the Mujeres Poderosas, which empowers women, and they work on so many things that it's hard sometimes working from their perspective. As they're working as staff, but then as residents living in Ramona Gardens, it's really there are different issues and different needs that need to be addressed.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you to all of our speakers. I feel like I learned so much from this. I'm sure our audience members did as well. We have some very interesting questions in the chat, so I just want to make sure that we can get through to them. So I'm just going to get started with one from an environmental educator. So let's see, this is from Mawada Al-Masri, and they say, as an environmental educator, I always try to include values and positive messages into my programs with children to instill the love and care for the natural world and the people. Could you share one or two messages or values that you think are important to instill in kids at a young age and encourage them to become adults who care about the environment and environmental justice? Thank you. And if I could just ask, we'll do a little more rapid fire for these so that we can get through as many as possible. Thank you.
Sure. I'll share on this one first. A new communication that I've learned is called compassionate communication or nonviolent communication. And it's something that a lot of children work with. And so I recommend looking into that. It's been a very powerful, holistic approach to how we think about the earth, how we think about our fellow humans, and how we think about the plants and animals we share the earth with. So it's called nonviolent communication or compassionate communication.
All right, and sorry, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I was just gonna, similarly, I think caring about the environment and environmental justice is really intertwined with caring about people and other people. So instilling, again, compassion is such a great word. All of the ways that you can get kids to care about their people, their neighbors, their families, their communities, really translates into caring about their environment generally.
And also, I think it's important to instill, instilling these values are really important, but you can do this in many ways. You can do this through educational programs, writing programs. You can create plays, stories, comic books. There's just so many ways that you can engage people to talk about their lived experiences, talk about solutions, create spaces for people, create spaces that are safe for people to express their concerns and think about solutions that will work for their neighborhoods.
Thank you, Connie. Next question we have from Arthur Bookstein. I love the idea of taking a back seat, valuing community member expertise, and working with communities on a level playing field. I was curious if any of the speakers have advice for how people can actually really get to know the communities that are most impacted by environmental justice or injustice. I've heard of things like community surveys and participating in town halls as possible ways to facilitate dialogue and relationships with different communities, but I'd love to hear the speaker's thoughts. Thank you so much for a wonderful panel.
I think working with communities really requires you to be present. And if there's an organization that you really are thinking about, that you feel strongly about, you can just ask if you can join, if there are any events that you can attend, and get to know the people in the community, get to know the people in the organization. Just get involved and really get to understand what is the community doing, what do they need, what kind of efforts they're leading related to environmental justice, and just see how you can support.
Yeah, I would say find the organizations that are doing the work, who know what they're doing and are doing it effectively in service, and then support them. It's a pretty safe way to make sure that what you're doing is going to support the people is if you find the organization who's doing it right, they're doing the work, they know what they're doing. Support them in whatever way you can. Maybe that's money. Maybe it's that you're a lawyer and you're gonna, use your law services. Maybe it's volunteering. Maybe it's driving a car. Maybe it's helping with the website. Whatever it is that those organizations need, helping them to meet those needs.
Okay. Elizabeth, if you're feeling comfortable, then we can move on, or if you want to speak up, no
I have
worries.
nothing to add. Those are great answers.
I agree. All right. So we have another question from Ed Aval, who says, you mentioned some of the tensions in addressing disparities in environmental justice communities, especially in these politically charged times. Economic costs of cleanup and loss of jobs are often used to push back against needed change, and there often are real economic costs. How do you engage policymakers to place community over near-term economic hits?
I can add one note to that, and with the asterisk that this is not my place of expertise by any means. But since I'm one of the people here and answering questions, I'll add the little bit of value that I have. And that, I think, well, for me, the number one thing with engaging policymakers is remembering that every policymaker is a human being before they're a policymaker. And I think we tend to get lost in that. And so I think at the heart of this movement, if we can always remember to be engaging them as human beings, again, seeing their side, trying to actually understand what it is that their objectives are. Maybe their objective just purely is money, but maybe it's safe. Maybe it genuinely is safety. And so if you two can connect over safety, which is what you both care about, you're more likely to make it further. So seeing them as humans, of course, there's a lot more to it, but that's at the heart of my strategy.
And I'll just add to that regarding some of the things our speakers have previously discussed regarding a just transition is involving people when there are concerns for job loss and there are concerns for economic effects in the local community. How can we work together? Because everybody wants their community to be safe and healthy, and they also want to feed their family, right? So those are things that everyone can get behind. And so I will just turn over to our last question of the panel. We have this from Alexia Kim, who is a board member of the Environmental Justice Student Interest Group, which I was previously a part of. So very thankful to have their support for this event. And she says, thank you for this amazing panel. Environmental justice seems to be a very dynamic and ever-growing field. And I would love to hear from your perspectives about how your strategies in environmental justice advocacy and action have changed throughout the past couple of years. How has the changing landscape of policy and community engagement shaped your current interventions and future long-term goals for promoting environmental justice? Thank you.
I'm going to sort of put that on its head and say that for all of the changes that we've gone through the last several years, especially with COVID and hybrid Zoom life, there's been a lot of consistency and really a lot of environmental justice work. The environmental justice movement has been building for decades, and the work that we do in the EJ Lab is really built on work that started with folks like Andrea Rico many years ago and is now led by Jill Johnston, who leads our EJ Lab. And it's really built on these relationships and trust with communities. So I think for all of the changes that we have in sort of the shorter term, these really long-term partnerships and trust and co-creation of solutions-oriented and action-oriented research and products is really the consistency here and really remains important and valuable.
I agree. I just wanted to add that for me, working with environmental justice communities, I really understand and value community advisory boards, just because it allows you to create a group with different stakeholders, residents, and just it allows you to really create a group that's focused on addressing solutions, identifying challenges, and thinking about building on everybody's strengths in terms of what kind of solutions, kind of partnerships are needed to really create equitable policies and practices that can support urban communities.
For me, what's changed is I'm just getting more involved with the environmental justice movement. So learning and listening and expanding the ways in which I can be of service. And on that note, I'd love to share a resource, which is the Intersectional Environmentalist book, which was written by Leah Thomas and others, and they're Southern California based. And if I was to recommend just one book for people who are just getting the introduction to intersectional environmentalism, which includes environmental justice, that's one of the books that I would recommend, The Intersectional Environmentalist. You can also follow them on social media and go to their website. But that book I would consider to be like one of the handbooks for the work that I do and how I'd like to bring myself to the environmental justice movement.
Thank you everyone for our wonderful panelists today and for your time, attention, and commitment to this work. I really do appreciate it. And I apologize I won't be able to get to some of the other questions I know are coming up because we are over time. But this is being recorded and it will be uploaded later on the Doers Club podcast, on YouTube, on Spotify, and on Audible. And so that's all from me. I don't know if Rob or Howard, if you have any last words of wisdom or closing remarks you'd like to share. I really do appreciate everyone's time.
Well, all I'd like to say is that this is exactly the kind of conversation that we thought would be really useful for everybody to hear. They hear a lot in our community about our research, but this is the kind of translation that we want to see happen, and we're grateful for that.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for a great session. Justine, thanks for moderating this and for the initiative to put this together. I think it was great.
Oh, there's a few more things that our department has, by the way, for those who are listeners. We do have teeing up a session of lightning talks on sustainability and healthcare, which is an initiative we launched to decarbonize our own healthcare system and university. And then on April the 26th, for Grand Rounds, we'll have a talk from Richard Jackson, who's a world expert on climate change and health. So thank you very much.
All right, well, we're leaving you with some more goodies to look forward to and some more resources and books. Thanks everyone, and we'll hope you have a great rest of your day, okay? All right, bye.
Thanks everyone, good to be with you.
Thank you.